my grandfather. Grandpa always took every opportunity to teach us youngsters about his life and to tell us experience that he had had. Now, to my younger self, my grandpa seemed like he was about this tall. And he's super skinny, and he gets this solemn face whenever he wants to tell you something important, and it's quite frightening. And one time in particular, he came up to me and said, "Rhett, I need to tell you something." I thought he would tell me some age-old saying that his grandfather had told him and his grandfather before that, and so on. And what he did is he sat me on the couch and he came up close like he was going to tell me a secret. And he said, "Rhett, there are two things you get when you walk a mile in another man's shoes. The first thing, you get another man's shoes. And the second, you get a mile head start." What my grandpa told me didn't mark me the way I thought it would, but it makes a good introduction for a graduation speech. While myself and many of the graduates before me haven't experienced as much as my grandfather, tonight I would like to reflect on two things that my high school experience has taught me. The first is my view on education. Education is not established by the memorization of countless facts pertaining to history, chemistry, and algebra. From what I've experienced, real education teaches how to overcome adversity. What I mean by this is that sometimes we fail a test, sometimes we lose a football game, and sometimes we don't even make the team. Our first inclination is to blame it on the teacher, coach, or freight train that made us late for school. But when we are in a particular mood, we learn that to achieve our goals, we must try harder. We learn that although these trials are hard, if we keep working, we gain experience, and eventually we overcome them. Gaining experience has never been easy. Will Rogers sums it up nicely. He says, "Good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from bad judgment." I wish there were an easier way to gain experience, but so far I've found no such solution. For example, I walked into class one day and saw a ceramic pumpkin sitting on my teacher's desk. The pumpkin was about the size of a basketball, and the teenager in me was screaming to pick it up. So, I walked over to the desk, and I picked up the pumpkin. I nonchalantly tossed the pumpkin from hand to hand until one of my peers walked in and said, "Hey, toss it over here." Without thinking of the consequences, I gently tossed it in his direction. The throw was perfect. It arched beautifully in the air until it got to my friends. Then it crashed into the wall and broke into hundreds of tiny little pieces. On that day we had a substitute, so I wrote my teacher a note and said that it was I who had broken the pumpkin and that I had full intention of replacing it. She still hasn't let me live it down. In a nutshell, I learned two very important things from this. The first, don't throw things that don't belong to you, especially when they belong to the person that has complete control over your English grade. And second, don't overestimate the catching ability of your peers to catch a flying pumpkin. When someone calls out, "Hey, toss it," I suggest you stop and think before you make a big mistake. However, on a serious note, there was something else. After that piece of pottery was broken, I had a choice. The same choice life gives us when we have the opportunity to learn from our mistakes. I could squirm like a coward and I could sweep those pieces under the rug and forget that it had ever happened and never tell my teacher what I had done. Or I could man up and take responsibility. Looking back, maybe breaking a teacher's ceramic pumpkin doesn't seem like the biggest moral crisis of my life. But as soon as the pumpkin shattered against the wall, reluctance set in. It's the same reluctance that settles in when playing my Xbox looks like a lot more fun than studying for an exam. Or writing a graduation speech. Stephen Pressfield, an author I have been recently introduced to, describes this feeling as resistance. This resistance is experienced as fear. He says that the more we fear something, the more we can be certain that that something is important to us and to the growth of our soul. Sadly enough, we will be experiencing this for the rest of our lives. I believe that we are meant to do certain things in life, great things. And when we come close to achieving those things, that is when the fear sets in. As the musician Tomas Kalnavi says, you will go toe-to-toe like David and Goliath. Who will be Goliath? And will you throw your stone? As the graduating class of 2013, what will be our stones? Will we forego the frat party to study for a college exam? Or will we choose to go out and get a job so we don't spend every day drinking Red Bull and playing Call of Duty in Dad's basement? Don't get me wrong, there is definitely a time and a place to have fun. I myself have played my share of video games until 4 o'clock in the morning. But learning to overcome adversity, knowing when to throw our stones, that is what strengthens us and makes us who we are on the inside. The second thing that means a lot to me is something that my father taught me. This lesson is that just because something has never been seen before does not mean that it can't happen. For years, the notion of someone running a 4-minute mile was completely unheard of. The only basis for this was that someone had never done it before. One day, a courageous athlete named Roger Bannister ran a mile in 3 minutes and 59 seconds. What was once regarded as physically impossible suddenly became a reality, and now thousands of people have done the same thing. A poem by Edgar Albert Guest, titled "It Couldn't Be Done," says it all. Somebody said that it couldn't be done, but he, with a chuckle, replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried. So he buckled right in with a trace of a grin on his face. If he worried, he didn't. He started to sing as he tackled the thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. Another man, a bit closer to home, experienced the same thing. A man had a dream, meaning he could see something that no one else could. Because of his extreme devotion to his moral code, he was persecuted and imprisoned. While incarcerated, he wrote a letter. Many of you know this epistle as Letter from a Birmingham Jail. This man was Martin Luther King Jr. Although he did not live to see his dream achieved, we can see that advancement today. Because of his courage to believe in something that people thought couldn't be done, the realization of racial equality was set in motion and continues to move forward today. What adversity will we face before our dreams are realized? Will we allow people to tell us that it can't be done, that we aren't good enough, that we aren't smart enough? Or will we do what can be done? You can pass that class. You can make it into medical school, and you can play professional basketball. The only thing stopping you is yourself. Once we realize how to overcome adversity, especially when that adversity is something that can't be done, then our potential for success cannot be measured. Like the author and director Stephen Chbosky says, in that moment, we are infinite.
It is an honor to present Austin Chapel High School's salutatorian, Chapel Jones.
Ladies,